Hello and welcome to the Mindfield podcast from Anfield Index Pro. As always, I am your host, Alan O'Donoghue, and I am joined by my partner in crime, Dr. Andrew Vincent. Andrew, we've been apart for too long.
We have
How
indeed.
how
It's
have we
been a long time.
coped?
How have we coped? Liverpool's been really good, so that's helped.
Maybe
Like
maybe
they're
we've
rolling.
helped
Maybe it's
Liverpool.
us.
Yeah,
What'd you say?
maybe.
You think we're a jinx?
No, maybe we've helped Liverpool by not recording.
In fairness, though, Liverpool's had some very successful years while we've been doing this pod.
That's very
So
true.
it's if we kicked off during the Hodgson era and then took a break and all of a sudden we had the Klopp era, then I would say let's hang it up. But I think like we've had some good years that we've been talking through. So let us keep putting our noise into the world.
Absolutely, we will. And today, Andrew, we are going to briefly touch on good old David Coote.
Mm,
And then we'll talk more importantly about Liverpool FC. And we did get a kind of question into the Minefield Discord group. And if you are on Discord, please do pop in any questions that you might have, because myself and Andrew will either totally ignore it, which I don't think we will, or we will answer it on the pod. But I suppose the question we got was from NFI, and it was, what does a referee saying a manager is a German see you next Tuesday, saying his team was shit, and his mate saying he hates Scousers betray, and about his mindset and capacity to make impartial decisions about that club. And for balance, he said he liked one of the team's more experienced players. Now, there's a couple other little kind of points in there, but I suppose, look, for me, I've I've never thought Coote was a particularly good referee, especially for Liverpool. But in general, I just don't rate him. Um, and then there's that, I suppose, childish side of me that goes, he looks like an asshole. Like he looks like he's a dickhead, and and I could seeing it didn't surprise me. Um, in terms of how he felt about Klopp. Um, but also, I I don't know if he consciously goes into Liverpool matches going, I am absolutely going to do what I can to help the opposition team. He may do, but I don't know if he does. And I think what can happen is we can get confirmation bias. So we can all sit back as Liverpool fans and go, look, and here is all the evidence. We have only won X amount of games or got X amount of points with David Coote in charge. Virgil van Dijk getting injured. Martin Odegaard handball, Rodri handball, even though we weren't involved in that game, and he's apparently a Man United fan, right? The the goal in Old Trafford, all this evidence, and we go, see, there is a conspiracy against Liverpool that goes right to the top, and I just don't buy that. What's your take?
my take is that everyone gripes about their job at some level, right? And we all have our experiences inside of our jobs that we have reactions to. And there's a level of professionalism expected at the same time. And so I think there's a way of looking which is like as being as generous as possible to David Coote and being as non-generous as possible to David Coote. And I think being as generous as possible, what you could say is probably it's no treat to referee Jurgen having a few choice words or a few choice names while you're in a space that you sort of perceive to be quote unquote private, where you can gripe about that a little bit. Maybe having some friends who like you do talk outside of your referee camp to a little bit, like starts to lack some professionalism, but like, okay, like, you know, to be able to say like, okay, Jurgen Klopp's an asshole or whatever, obviously worse words we use, but like, is that the worst thing in the world if you're like a fourth official and you've spent 90 minutes getting screamed at by someone to go home and be like, this guy was a fucking dick to me. Like, that seems fair enough, to be honest with you. Um, I think even in its most generous, to be out in a public setting like that while you're being recorded, while you're cognizant enough about being recorded to add a follow-up video saying, hey, that video can't go anywhere, is a staggering lack of professionalism. Because like, look, like that would be the equivalent of me like having a few and hanging out with my friends and just being like, oh, listen to this thing about this one fucking client. Can you believe this? And it's like, no, no, you don't do that. Every profession has its standards of what you talk about and what you don't talk about and levels of professionalism. And so if part of your role as a referee is to be as unbiased as possible, as I said, a staggering lack of professionalism to then go out and speak in such a clearly biased way. There's people who can understand that, maybe talking with other referees who can commiserate with you about that. That's an okay place to talk about it. Talking about that in that public of a way and like getting kind of drunk and making yourself seem like kind of like, oh yeah, this guy, it's like that was what was going on, right? He wanted to look cool. That's kind of what this video looked like to me, is this is someone who wanted to seem cool when he was with some people having a few drinks. And it's like, yikes, does not reflect well on you. And probably, that childish part of you that thinks he just looks like an asshole, like we can confirm that this is someone who would be unpleasant to spend any amount of time with at all. Um, at its least generous, things get conspiratorial, and it's this idea of like, okay, like, is this person capable of taking what might be a long-standing hatred of Liverpool and approaching their games in a way that's unbiased? I mean, my guess is like if you have anyone who's refereeing in England at any sort of level, it means they have some interest in football, which means they have a team, they have a cheering interest, they have a cheering interest in the Premier League. To expect anyone to not seems weird. I don't know where you would find these people who care enough about football to referee it and dedicate their life to one of the most thankless aspects of the sport, um, but be totally unaffiliated. That's a non-existent person, or if that person exists, are one of. And so, to answer NFI's question, having some sort of interest or experience and like maybe even dislike of a certain team or certain club from your own personal preferences probably exists for everyone, right? And like that's okay if you can be professional enough to put that to the side, then okay. Like I have no problem with that. And like probably some people can do it, and there's going to be some people who struggle more. And I think it's hard to not look at this and then see some of the data points that you mentioned before and say, you know what? Now that we see this other video, it's impossible to not look at this in a different way and say maybe this is someone who struggles with professionalism because he does. That's quite obvious. And so, where does that extend to, and what does that mean, and how has that affected some of those calls? It's impossible to say because we don't know. But it's impossible to also not look at those data points and wonder. And I think that's especially true for Liverpool. And I was saying this to you a little bit before the pod, like with only having very minimal history of understanding Liverpool as a city and the mentality of people from Liverpool and what they have been through in the context of the larger history of England. Um, it's easy for me to sit over in New York and say like, it's probably some people being conspiratorial because I've never been on the wrong side of a conspiracy or by a concerted effort to put down a group of people or to make them look bad or to make their situation worse. But Liverpool, and especially Liverpool Football Club with Hillsborough, have been in situations where there have been conspiracies and decisions made um, to marginalize those people or make their life worse or put them down or gang up against them. And I think if you've been through something like that, your radar for it is always going to be a little different. Does that mean that there's a conspiracy here? I don't know. But what it does probably mean at the very least is like, if that's been your experience and you look at those data points, the red flags are going to get even higher. And so I can totally understand that. And it's entirely possible that that's completely well founded and not wrong. Is
Mm.
like, I have a close friend who's refereed at a high level over here for a long time. Like, I trust his ability to be fair. Like, the way he approaches even conversations like with me and my friends about, like he's refed in games where he was the fourth official when Wayne Rooney was like an official for, or the manager of the Philadelphia Union, and got yelled at by Wayne Rooney, which, like, you know, like, did he share that with us? Yeah. Did he say F this guy and F that and these people suck and this team's a bunch of assholes? Like, even to us, no way. That's not something he would say,
Yeah.
because like he takes that level of professionalism seriously. The same way, like, I wouldn't share with him information about clients or who I work with or what teams or what, like, there's some of it that's just private. And so, um, I think this is not a chance to undermine every official in all of PGMOL, or say all of officiating is corrupt. But it probably is a good situation to say, hey, there's probably someone here whose bias has legitimately interfered with his ability to do the job. Now that we see that bias clearly and see how that professionalism can be compromised, probably it's not a job he should be doing at that level anymore.
Mm. I think you're right, and I think that is the thing. Like, this isn't just about Liverpool. I think his ability to be professional, in this regard, has gone in the bin, and I don't see how he can go and referee, even if he all of a sudden becomes completely professional. But I don't see how he can survive in the arena of professional top level football in England and not have every single decision he makes questioned, because he is
Yeah,
human and there's human error involved in being a referee. Um, and for me, it is that professionalism that has to be called into question. But the other element that it also brings in for me is the question of oversight of referees, and how the referees have been, and PGMOL have been protected to a large extent from being for being accountable for um, the levels and quality of officiating in the Premier League. Every team, every single team, and their fans will complain about the level of refereeing, and there is very little room for um, constructive feedback to be given. I don't mean roaring on the sideline, but a genuine constructive feedback to be given to to the refereeing association. So I think what I would hope, sorry, is what comes out of this is that obviously David moves off and builds a new career doing something else, and that the PGMOL will, that the Premier League and PGMOL will look at seriously how can we get the level of officiating higher, where we're not having ex-referees come on to national broadcasters and saying, I made this decision because I didn't want my friend to be under pressure. Like, that's
right,
just unacceptable. And I think this has
right.
brought it to a whole new level.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. Is like, there is something real. Like, the curtain's been drawn back with some of this stuff, and like you can see over the past few years, different incidents. Like, whether it's the all right, good process, lads, and like just the clearly wrong decisions, or the different things where it's like, um, like, I made that decision so my friend wouldn't be under pressure. Like, there's things going on there that are not honest. It's not just ref the game in a straight up way. And so I
Mhm.
think that needs to be taken seriously. I think people have every reason to be really upset by this and frustrated by this, and then look at those data points and say, like, what was going on here this whole time? And like, yeah, got to be more oversight. There's got to be some trust in officiating. And I I struggle a little bit because like having a friend who's refed at a high level, like I think they're a really easy target that can't defend themselves,
Hmm.
and that's shitty, right? They get so much flack. They get, it's you're totally allowed to harass referees and yell about referees, and like there is real unfairness that can go on. There are legitimate bad calls and mistakes, but it's tough because like they really can't defend themselves, and so it's like we can say like, oh, he's like looks like a terrible person to spend any amount of time around based on that video, and that's probably a little unfair to the guy, but at the same time, like I don't know. Here we are. We have our reactions too, and
Yeah.
so it's tough, but it also I understand the reason you can't just get a free pass either.
No.
And so everyone's got their biases, everyone's got their reactions, and um, do I think that referees as people can be a Man United fan, but also be possible of putting that aside and refereeing a game in a fair way? Absolutely. Like I do. I think that's possible, but not everyone can do it.
Mm.
And so, there's got to be real ways to figure out who can do it and who can't.
Mm. And it can be situational, you know,
Hmm.
like maybe Jurgen Klopp in your ear for 75 minutes um, makes you, if there's a 50-50 decision that could go either way, makes you go, no, I'm just going to let it play because I've just got his voice ringing in my ear. Again, it's not professional, it's not right, but he can't turn around to Jurgen and go, fuck off. I can give him a
Right.
card, but
And you know what? Like, I've never refed anything at any significant level, but like I refed my job in university. We'll call it university instead of college. My job in university, one of them was that I used to referee intramural volleyball. And like even that, like there's nothing to it, right? Like you
yeah.
stand there, you blow a whistle, you point, but it's like I used to fucking forget the score. Like it was, like you have all this stuff going on, and you have people who are into it out there. So if you ever played Marist College intramural volleyball, you can, and you thought that I might have gotten the scorekeeping wrong, you're probably correct. That was Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 to 11. I wasn't keeping perfectly accurate track of score. Um, but it's amazing how you're there, there's a lot of pressure on you, like there's people who get frustrated with you, you do have your opinions about the teams, you do kind of like someone starts to treat you and act like kind of an asshole, like I'm not throwing games for anyone else, nothing like that, but like that affects you and
Mm.
like changes how you feel about things and how you react to things, and sometimes it's just like fuck, like I made a mistake there, like I got to even it out, which I know like we don't, like trained officials will have better ways of dealing with that and processes for dealing with that, but like it's a hard job.
Mm. And like when and like we like to do, when we pull it back to the real world, like if I'm in work and my boss comes into the room and starts shouting and roaring at me, I don't hear what he's saying. All I'm thinking about is how can this not be my fault? There is some way that this is not my fault, that I can point it out to him, and I will respond to the emotion because that's what we do. We respond to the emotion. So, as a referee, I can only imagine or a Premier League referee, it's massively amplified because you could have 75, 80,000 people in a stadium, every single one of them baying for your blood from both sides. Like, and we are not sitting here defending the referees. Well, I'm not going to speak for you, Andrew, but I think the level of refereeing in the Premier League is horrendous. But you couldn't pay me enough money to do it either. So,
Yeah, I am not defending David Coote, I'll put it that way, and like
yeah,
I think like refereeing is a hard job. um if we want people who are good at it to do it, then probably finding ways to make it a little bit more appealing also doesn't hurt. And so and it's a little bit in my nature. um if you want rights and responsibilities counterbalance each other's, if you want to have the right to good officiating, then you do also have a responsibility for thinking about how do you treat officials, and what are the conditions you set up for them. And so that's certainly not to say that like if we just took better care of David Coote, he wouldn't be such an asshole. Like, I don't really think that's true, but I do think like it's probably worth having a look at ourselves too a little bit. Um,
Yeah. I think for me, rugby is probably the best I've seen where respect and responsibility with refereeing is in place. Like referees are given so much support in terms of players can't swear at them, and if they do, the referee can change, like switch the penalty around. Um, but also the video assistant ref, or the for rugby is there to almost try and hold the referee accountable. So the referee will say, "This is my decision. Can you see anything that would make me doubt this decision?"
mhm,
And there is a conversation that everybody hears that goes on between the two, and it's not been done while the game is going on. Do you know what I mean? It's
mhm,
happening where there's a pause. Now I know it's a
yeah,
different game, and we can't do the same, but I think there's a level of transparency. There's a level of respect, where it's not okay to abuse referees from
mhm,
players or managers. Now I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that would be a rarity more so than say in football where it's a match by match occurrence.
yeah. I mean, the culture of how referees in the Premier League are reacted to, and I don't know a lot about other leagues, but like is so bizarre to me coming from other places. Like I know the names of refs in the English Premier League. Like I mean, I've been watching hockey, NHL hockey for my entire life. I couldn't name a single ref probably. Like if you mentioned a few names, I could probably pick a few that I think are right.
Mm,
Um, but like I couldn't look at a single referee and tell you who that person is. Definitely couldn't tell you where they grew up or what game they're officiating on the weekend or what their team was growing up or where they played or anything like that. Like it's so weird to me. Like it
yeah,
really is bizarre, but it's part of it.
yeah. In Gaelic football, we know referees because they usually rob us, and this is where Mr. Hendrick would be chuckling to himself because his county benefited greatly from poor officiating over my team a number of years ago, which I'm not bitter about anymore. Anyway, that's enough about referees. So, Andrew, we're sitting here Thursday, the 14th of November. Liverpool FC are sitting on top of the Premier League and on top of the Champions League. What the fuck is happening, man?
We're just fucking good. Although I don't know that we have been that good. Like we have been, um, but I think there's still more that this group is capable of.
Yeah, I agree. I watched the games, and I come away with a sense of we won that game. We played well in moments, but there's definitely levels that we can step up. But I don't know if that's just getting used to the way that old Arne has them playing and set up, where it's a lot more controlled. It's not as dynamic and it's not as fast and furious. It's a lot more controlled, but I like it.
Yeah, I think like the moments they're more thoughtful about when they turn up the tempo. Um, and I think actually like maybe where I saw it most clearly still was preseason and in a few moments since, but like it's like there's these moments where things are calm and things are controlled, and then all of a sudden the tempo goes up, and it's like
Mhm.
boom, 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 and then that play that was happening a lot in preseason where it goes up to the striker, back to the midfielder, person's running in behind, and like it happens like that, and like you can see where these moments like they're kind of working on these and practicing these and like getting that change of tempo into gear. When the tempo changes, it's super impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to tear David Coote's head off last Saturday when I saw the photograph of him go or the video of him going, no free kick. Anyway, good old Darwin stuck it in the back of the net. But
Yeah.
I
Well,
wanted
and
to
here's
ask.
the thing, he kind
Yeah,
of
go on.
got his,
Yeah, he did.
you know, like
Um,
you didn't have to tear his head off, Al. He did
uh,
it for you.
he did it himself. I wanted to ask you about the fringe players, Andrew.
Hmm.
Um, the things are working really well, and I think I was listening to Fatigue Index this week, or maybe it was Under Pressure, and they were talking about um, how like the likes of Grav at the current level is on for like a 6,000 minute season and stuff like that, which obviously is crazy. It's impossible. It can't happen. But for those fringe players, the likes of Endo, I suppose the likes of Joe Gomez, the I'm trying to think who else, Kwanzaa, um, who aren't getting as much game time. Tyler Morton maybe didn't expect to be getting too much game time anyway, but um, how does Arne manage them on a psychological level so that they are still dialed in and still ready to perform when called upon, even if it's only for minuscule moments or minutes?
Yeah, I think maybe starting with like what I see in his press conferences, um, and maybe what I see that's different. So I think compared to Klopp, I think Klopp used to give out minutes here and there for the purpose of getting people some playing time and kind of like helping them stay engaged. Like I think there would be moments where like, you know, he might put someone on just because that person hadn't really played that much or just because like wanted to give that person a shot at things. Slot does not really do that. Like I don't think he puts anyone on without a really like a purpose in the game of winning that game. Maybe the exception being Quanta at the end of, I can't think of the game now. But he got like 5 minutes or something after he had made that mistake, and I wonder if that was a little bit of like a pat on the back or a little bit of like a or something. But for the most part, he doesn't give out those minutes. Um, you know, he definitely does the thing where he speaks highly of people in press conferences. Um, you know, so like he is really complimentary of, you know, if someone hasn't played a lot or if someone gets in, like or has made a mistake, like he'll definitely, like with Kwanzaa again, like he made a point to highlight, look, I didn't take him out because of this mistake. Um, and I think he's a great player. So I think he's able to find that balance of, we're going to be really competitive in these games. Um, that might mean I think highly of you, but you're still not going to play. And I think that's really important. Um, it's very easy for players to assume, like if they're not getting playing time, that the coach sort of doesn't like them, not necessarily like them as people, but even like them as players. And so, you know, the player mentality is often like, well, what do I have to do to get in? What do I have to do to get in? What do I have to get better at? Like, what do I have to cut out of my game? And that's, you know, that's understandable. Players want playing time. But that mentality can get carried away really quickly and can undermine people's ability to perform at a high level because they start to question themselves or try to change things, or maybe there's nothing that they need to change necessarily, and they drive themselves crazy trying to figure out, what does the coach want from me? And it's really just about, this is the team we're going with right now. You know, so I get the sense that he does a really nice job of just kind of keeping people even keeled, of like keeping people aware of their strengths and aware of what they're doing well and being complimentary in practice. Like I don't get the sense that he's someone who, it's like if you're not in the lineup, you're just dead to him. You're like not interesting to him, where he's just not going to engage with you. I think he probably understands the significance of staying engaged with people. Um, and being complimentary and finding moments to maybe compliment the person who hasn't played or compliment the person who's a backup, or, you know, to say, he said it with Bradley a few times, right? Like, we've got two excellent players at this position. Actually, he says that all the time. You know, like we've got two excellent players in every position. Um, so I think that's part of it. Um, the thing, like, that's what I've seen. What I haven't seen, but like the way that I look about this and think about this, um, winning changes a lot. And so, like, you'll hear this all the time with players who aren't in the lineup at different places or aren't getting the time that they want. If the team wins, then they'll kind of be like, okay, like, um, maybe I don't agree with it. Maybe I think I could have done a better job, but the team is winning. So I don't have much scope to question the coach's decisions. Like, we're winning everything right now. And so there's not going to be a lot of players who, even if they have some concerns, those probably aren't going to get to a level of frustration, because when the team is winning, the atmosphere around the place is good, but also they'll probably feel like, okay, like, if I'm going to get my chance, or if I'm going to expect my chance, I expect my chance once someone blows theirs. If everyone's playing pretty well right now and we're winning, then, like, I don't feel hard done by, because even if I think, like, even if I'm Joe Gomez, and let's say that I think that I'm better than Kanate, which, like, Kanate's been awesome. Probably you're sitting there and you're like, he's playing great. I understand why I'm not going to get in over him right now. But even let's say he wasn't playing that great, probably you're sitting there and you're like, okay, like, we've given away barely any goals. Until he makes a mistake or we hit a tough run of form, I'm just not going to get my chance. And I understand that. And so I think it's much easier to manage players who aren't getting playing time when all of your decisions look golden.
Yeah, and I think we had this a similar conversation with Klopp at one point. And that's it. Everyone, you know, what is it? The tides, all tides, uh, raise every boat, or
A
whatever the hell that is. I
rising
don't know.
tide lifts all ships or
That's the
something like
very
that.
one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's it. Like, people are able to enjoy and embrace the success, because that's why we play sport, is for success. Um, and I'm really curious, and maybe I said this to you the last time we were talking. I'm really curious to see how Slot responds when we hit a sticky patch. Now, whether that's through injuries, or his tactics get found out, or he's not as tactically flexible in game, to because that, I suppose, for me, the biggest thing watching Liverpool under Slot is how tactically fluid they seem to be, and how they're able to change, and he's able to change the tactical structure of the team in game so much better than lots and lots of managers, some of the best. So, but there will come a time where we hit a sticky patch. It just is going to happen. I just expected it to kick in by now. I didn't expect you and I to be sitting here in the middle of November and be talking about a team that have lost one and drawn one game out of
Hmm.
all the games they've played, which is absolutely phenomenal. So
Hmm.
I think it is easy. I'm curious to see how he responds, and then subsequently how the players respond when things don't go as well. If there's, you know, rumors start to leak out about Joe Gomez is looking for a new team in January, Endo's looking to head off in the summer, and how that impacts on how things are going within the squad and the makeup.
Hmm. Yeah, that's always the trick, is what happens when some adversity pops up. And can the team continue to pull in the same direction, or are there suddenly a lot of questions about the direction? I think right now it's still new enough in his tenure that, like, the newness of the ideas is a motivator and will move people forward. Like, there's clearly buy-in to how he's doing things. So I think, like, if we were to bump into a tough patch, I wouldn't be super worried about that changing a lot, or like people turning on him, unless it got really bad. But I just don't, especially with how much kind of credit he's gotten the bank from this early start. Um, It would also just be interesting to see kind of what his press conferences are like, what kinds of things he tends to bring up there. Like, does his tone change? He doesn't strike me as being super reactive, which is beneficial. And so, like, the things you worry about from a manager or a coach is like, can they separate the process and the outcome well? And there's certain coaches who it's like if they lose, then immediately they're like, well, look, we got to change this, we got to change this. It's like they can go into a little bit of a panic mode. He doesn't strike me as a panicker.
No.
Um, he's going to be clear about what needs to be better, but I don't think he's going to take the process that they've worked so hard to start putting in place and then suddenly be like, oh, well, we've got to change this, we got to change this, we got to do this, and like a lot of change and panic from leadership or panic from a coach can be destabilizing, and um, I would be surprised to see that take place.
Mm, let's hope you're right. And just to kind of move into one more area, just to before we kind of wrap it up, what's been interesting to me is the Anfield crowd. At the start of the season, and maybe it was just the coverage I was seeing, whatever, but they seemed really quiet a lot of the time. Now, in recent matches, the last couple of games specifically, the crowd seemed to kind of take it upon themselves to go, no, we got to ratchet up the noise in here. We got to make this happen. The match against Atalanta, the match against Chelsea, that kind of thing. I think they're finding their voice again. But I'm curious what your take is on what occurred at the start of the season that caused the fans and the crowd to be a little bit quiet.
I really don't know. You could certainly attribute some of it to like a change in style and maybe like a things being a little bit slower, things being a little bit more controlled. Um, we won those games, but like it never felt the game. It's not like Jurgen Klopp's 4-3 win over Norwich or whatever that was, 5-4 or whatever,
Mm.
like the broken glasses game, and like how can you not be yelling and losing your mind during that one?
Yeah,
Like it's a pretty tactical, comfortable 2-0 win. And I think in some ways it's just less exciting. Um, so maybe there's some reaction to that. It's just like, what are we looking at? And it's not as much of a basketball game. And so it's just like, maybe not as much to naturally cheer for. I really don't know. And, maybe also some of it is just storylines take some time to develop. Our run at the start of the season was not necessarily, it's not like we walked out and our first game of the season was City and it was dead quiet.
yeah.
And I think that makes a difference too. Um, there's probably going to be some games, but look, like I've also never been to Anfield, so I don't know. Like, um, but I think probably that was part of it. Is you were seeing games that we would expect to win against teams like that aren't the most exciting to watch us play against, and by and large, those games were kind of on the tamer side and comfortable, if not emphatic, wins, and those might just not be the kind of thing that get people really up and out of their seat compared to a Champions League night at Atalanta or a big game against a Chelsea team that suddenly figured out how to play again. And those are just games I think probably that naturally, wherever you put them in the calendar, would maybe be a little bit louder. But that's my best guess, Al.
That's a good decent guess. I think for me, I think what where I've landed with it is um, that I wonder, did we just come into the season as fans expecting the same thing, which was the Jurgen Klopp, you know, where we don't have this game won, it is going to be close. It's going to be a 5-4. It's going to be a 4-3, or we're going to have a 5-0 blitz and win against a big team. And that didn't happen. And it was those boring 2-0 wins. So I think it kind of caught people off guard a little bit. And I think what's maybe happening now, and this is just my hypothesis, I think what's happening now is that the fans are realizing, going, well, this is how we operate. This is how it's going to work.
Hmm.
So let's get our voice back and let's start singing and try and, create our own atmosphere. And we don't need to wait for something on the pitch that we've been used to, been brought on a roller coaster for the last, 3, 4, 5 years of Klopp's tenure. Um, we're just strolling through the water park, and let's start cheering and singing because we want to, because we're happy,
Yeah,
because we're good.
I do think there's something to that. Like, I think that's, there's like what it means to be a fan and in the stadium and making noise and cheering for different things probably changes a little bit manager by manager. And as the team turns over and different, like, obviously the team hasn't really turned over a lot here, but like the team turns over, who's good turns over, you got different songs, different things you're connecting with, and different things to expect and react to. So maybe it's just figuring out how to be Anfield under a slot regime.
I like it. I like it. Andrew, thank you so much for your insights as always. Brilliant. Brilliant. You should be a podcaster. Uh, and listeners, thank you so much for your ears. We do apologize for the delay in getting back on track. Life got in the way of us, but we're hopeful of getting back on a even keel now, where we'll be back to our usual regular every couple of weeks. But until next time, look after yourselves.